Duke David's carriage thundered through the gates of Ashford Manor 3 days early from Parliament. What he saw made his heart stop. Right there in the middle of his grand estate stood his 12-year-old daughter, Olivia, dressed in a maid's grey uniform, holding a scrub brush, her small hands trembling. The daughter of a duke, treated like a common servant. He froze, not because he couldn't believe his eyes, but because the woman he trusted most, his new wife Veronica, was standing right behind her, smiling. What happened next shook the entire British aristocracy. Hello, welcome and welcome back. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy. The manor stood quiet that morning, too quiet for a home that once echoed with laughter. Sunlight spilled across the wide marble floors, bouncing off the crystal chandelier and brushing against the grand piano in the corner. The air smelled faintly of roses, the scent her late mother used to love. 12-year-old Lady Olivia Ashford tiptoed down the hallway, a worn leather journal clutched tightly in her arms. Her tiny feet made soft sounds against the cold marble as she looked around, searching for a voice that would not answer anymore. Her mother's. She stopped at the family portrait that hung above the staircase. In it, her father's arm was around her mother's shoulders, both smiling wide, while Olivia, much younger, sat on her mother's lap. Her small hand brushed the gilded frame gently. "Good morning, Mama," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. It had been 2 years since the fever that took her mother away. 2 years since the house stopped smelling like fresh scones on Sunday mornings. And though her father, Duke David, tried to fill that space with gifts, tutors, and promises, nothing had truly healed the emptiness in her little heart. Downstairs, the sound of sharp heels echoed across the stone floors. Veronica, Duke David's new wife, tall, elegant, and always wearing perfume that made Olivia's head ache, was already awake. "Good morning, Your Grace," Olivia said softly as she reached the dining hall. Veronica turned slowly, her lips curling into a faint smile that never reached her eyes. "You're awake early," she said, her voice smooth but edged with irritation. "Why are you wearing that dress?" Olivia blinked and looked down at her blue silk gown, the one her father had chosen for her before he left for London. "Papa said I should wear it," she replied quietly. Veronica's smile faltered. "Your papa said." She set down her teacup with a quiet clink. Of course he did. Something flashed in Veronica's eyes, not warmth, but cold, calculated jealousy. "Do you know how much that dress costs, Olivia?" Olivia shook her head timidly. "More than what we pay the housemaids in a year." Veronica folded her arms. "You're a child. You shouldn't be wearing silk while others work to keep this estate running. You should be learning humility." "But Papa," Veronica's voice sharpened, "your Papa isn't here right now." She stood, walking around the long oak table, her heels clicking hard against the tiles. "He left me in charge, and that means you do as I say." Olivia swallowed hard, her eyes growing glassy. Veronica reached into a nearby drawer and pulled out a folded bundle of grey cloth, a faded maid's uniform. She threw it at the girl's feet. "From now on, you'll wear this during the day," Veronica said coldly. "The staff is short-handed, and you're old enough to help earn your keep." Olivia froze, staring at the uniform on the floor. "But I'm not a maid." Veronica's lips curved cruelly. "Oh, aren't you? You live here, don't you? You eat food that others cook, sleep in a bed while others clean. That's what servants do." Olivia bent slowly, picking up the uniform with trembling fingers. The fabric smelled like lye soap and old wood. Her eyes stung, but she tried not to cry. "Go on," Veronica said, her tone impatient. "Put it on, and be quick about it before breakfast gets cold." Olivia turned and walked upstairs, her steps heavier with each one. Inside her room, she closed the door quietly and sat on the bed, staring at the portrait of her mother on the vanity. "I don't want to wear it," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I want you back, Mama." The portrait didn't answer. Moments later, she stood before the mirror, dressed in the oversized uniform. The sleeves were too long, the waist hung loose, and the collar scratched her neck. She brushed a tear away and forced a weak smile at her reflection. "Papa will come home soon," she whispered. "He'll fix it. He always fixes everything." But deep inside, a small part of her knew some things even papas couldn't fix right away. When she walked back downstairs, Veronica's lips twisted slightly. "Better," she said. "Now help Mrs. Pemberton in the kitchen. And don't break anything." "Yes, Your Grace." Olivia nodded, walking quietly into the kitchen where the head cook was already kneading dough. The older woman looked at Olivia in shock. "Good heavens, child, why are you dressed like that?" Olivia forced a smile. "Her Grace said I should help you." Mrs. Pemberton frowned, wiping flour from her hands. "That woman will see her reckoning one day," she muttered under her breath. Then she crouched down to Olivia's level. "Don't you cry now, love. Just stay close to me. I won't let her touch you." Olivia nodded gratefully, wiping her nose. Throughout the morning, she helped carry trays, polish silverware, and scrub pots, tasks too heavy for her small hands. But each time Veronica walked by, Olivia straightened quickly, forcing herself to smile. By noon, the little girl was exhausted. Her feet ached, and her fingers were red from washing dishes. She sat outside by the rose garden, trying to rest, when Veronica's voice cut through the quiet. "Olivia?" Olivia jumped up. "Yes, Your Grace." "You left water on the floor in the hall. Clean it immediately." "I'm sorry, Your Grace. I'll do it right now." "Do it properly," Veronica snapped. "If you break another vase, you'll skip supper." Olivia ran off, her small slippers slapping against the marble. As she wiped the wet floor, she looked up at the family portrait again, her father's smiling face staring back at her. "I miss you, Papa," she whispered. That night, she sat at the window, watching the long driveway. Her father had promised to write, but no letter had come. She waited, clutching her mother's journal, until her eyelids grew heavy. Her small voice faded into the night. Maybe tomorrow he'll come home. But downstairs, Veronica was already on the telephone, her laughter filling the house. "Yes, darling, everything's perfectly fine here," she purred. "She's behaving now. Oh, David won't be back until next week. The estate is mine till then." As she spoke, Olivia's silhouette stayed framed against the soft moonlight. A small child in a maid's uniform, asleep on the edge of her bed, still waiting for the father, who had no idea what was happening under his roof. The manor was alive with activity that Saturday evening. The servants polished the silver, the cook barked orders from the kitchen, and the scent of roasted pheasant filled the air. But amid the bustle and shine, one small figure moved quietly. Olivia. She wore the same faded maid's uniform from the day before. The sleeves had been rolled up this time, but the fabric still hung loose around her thin frame. Her golden braids had begun to loosen, and faint shadows of fatigue darkened her once bright eyes. Mrs. Pemberton watched her with pity as she carried a tray of wine glasses. "Careful, my lamb," she whispered. "Her Grace says you'll serve tonight, but don't let her catch you trembling." Olivia nodded silently, clutching the tray like a lifeline. In the grand sitting room, Veronica was arranging fresh lilies in a tall crystal vase. She wore a deep emerald gown that shimmered under the chandelier, her perfume filling the air before she even spoke. Her friends were arriving, wealthy, sharp-tongued women eager to gossip about the latest scandals among London's elite. "Ladies," Veronica's laughter rang out as the first carriage pulled in. "You're right on time. Tonight is for fine wine and excellent company." One of her guests, a heavily jeweled woman named Lady Beatrice, chuckled as she entered. "Ah, Veronica, you look radiant. Marriage is treating you well." Veronica's smile widened. "Of course it is. David spoils me more than I ever imagined." "Where is he?" another asked. "I thought he'd be here." Veronica waved a gloved hand dismissively. "Parliamentary business. He won't be back for another week. I run the estate while he's away." The women exchanged knowing smiles. Power was a language they all understood. "Come, sit," Veronica said, gesturing toward the dining table. "I have something special tonight. Aged wine." And a little surprise. That surprise was standing quietly by the kitchen door, waiting for Veronica's signal. "Olivia," Veronica called sharply. The room fell silent. "Bring the wine." Olivia stepped forward, her tiny hands trembling as she carried the silver tray into the dining room. The crystal wine glasses clinked softly with each careful step. The guests turned their heads as she approached. A hush fell over the table. One woman leaned forward, whispering to another behind her gloved hand. "Is that the Duke's daughter?" "Yes," the other murmured, her brows raised in shock. "Good heavens, why is she dressed like a scullery maid?" Veronica smiled thinly, pretending not to hear. "Careful, Olivia," she said aloud, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Don't spill on my guests. That uniform you're wearing wouldn't survive another stain." Soft, uncomfortable laughter rippled around the table. Olivia's cheeks burned crimson, her eyes stung with tears, but she blinked them away and focused on the tray. She placed the glasses one by one, her small hands shaking so badly that one nearly slipped. "Steady," Veronica barked. "You're so clumsy, just like your mother was with the household accounts." The words hit Olivia like a physical blow. Her lip quivered, but she kept her head down. She wanted to run, to hide, to scream, but the voice inside her whispered, "Papa will come back. Just wait. Just hold on." As the women began to eat, Olivia stood by the wall, silent and motionless, like a piece of furniture. She watched them laugh and gossip, their diamond necklaces glittering under the candlelight, their manicured hands waving in the air as they told stories of trips to Paris and new country estates. None of them looked her way again, except for Lady Beatrice, who studied the child quietly, something soft and troubled flickering behind her sharp gaze. During the second course, Veronica leaned back in her chair, swirling her wine. "You know," she said casually, "when I married David, this house was in absolute disarray." She paused dramatically. "His late wife spoiled that child rotten. I had to bring the order back to Ashford Manor." "You're doing admirably," someone said, nodding approvingly. "Children need discipline, especially girls of her station. They must learn grace and humility." "Exactly," Veronica said, her eyes gleaming. "This one now knows her place. She serves, she listens, and perhaps one day she'll be grateful I taught her properly." That was when Olivia accidentally dropped a silver spoon. The sound rang loud against the marble floor. Everyone turned. Veronica's eyes flashed with fury. "Pick it up!" Olivia bent quickly to retrieve it, but as she did, the hem of her oversized uniform caught on the edge of the chair and tore with a soft ripping sound. A small gasp escaped her lips. "You can't even stand properly," Veronica hissed, rising to her feet. Before anyone could react, she struck the girl across the face. The slap echoed through the dining hall like a thunderclap. The guests froze. Even the servants in the corridor stopped moving. Olivia stood completely still, her cheek red and burning, her small hands clutching the spoon so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Clean it up," Veronica said coldly, "and stop sniveling. No one likes a weak child." Lady Beatrice stood slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Veronica," she began carefully, her voice measured but firm. "She's just a little girl." But Veronica waved her off dismissively. "Please, Beatrice, you wouldn't understand. She needs to learn discipline, or she'll grow up spoiled and useless." Olivia knelt on the cold marble and wiped the floor with a linen napkin, trying desperately to swallow the lump in her throat. Her tears splashed silently onto the stone, but she dared not make a sound. When she finished, she stepped back and curtsied slightly, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry, Your Grace." Veronica didn't answer. She turned back to her friends, forcing a bright smile as if nothing had happened. The laughter resumed, though it sounded hollow now, awkward and strained. Lady Beatrice remained standing for a moment longer, Her eyes locked on Olivia's trembling form. Then she sat down slowly, her jaw tight, saying nothing more. But she would remember this night, every detail of it. Later, as the evening stretched on and the guests moved to the drawing room for brandy and cards, Olivia slipped out through the servants' entrance into the rose garden. The moonlight washed over her small frame as she sat beside the marble fountain, her mother's favourite spot. The sound of trickling water masked her quiet sobs. Her cheek still throbbed where Veronica had struck her. She dipped her hand into the cool fountain water and touched it gently to her face, wincing at the sting. "Papa," she whispered, her voice breaking, "please come home. I'm trying to be good. I promise I'm trying." The roses swayed gently in the night breeze, but they offered no comfort. Her mother's journal lay open on her lap, the pages fluttering. Inside, her mother had written in elegant script, "My dearest Olivia, always remember, you are loved beyond measure. No matter what storms may come, you are a daughter of this house, and nothing can take that away from you." Olivia traced the words with her fingertip, fresh tears blurring her vision. "I don't feel like a daughter anymore, Mama," she whispered. "I feel like nothing." Inside the mansion, Veronica poured another glass of wine, laughing loudly to mask the growing unease among her guests. But upstairs, in the dim corridor leading to the Duke's private study, a faint red light blinked quietly in the shadows. The small recording light of a hidden security camera. Duke David had installed them throughout the manor after a series of thefts in neighbouring estates 6 months prior. He'd told only the head butler, Mr. Whitmore, about their locations. Every word, every slap, every tear. It had all been captured. Veronica didn't know it yet, but the walls had eyes and ears. And soon, someone else would see everything she'd done. The next morning broke quietly over Ashford Manor. Sunlight cut across the velvet curtains like golden blades. The house was still, except for the faint sound of dishes clattering in the scullery. Olivia was up before dawn again, her small hands already red and raw from scrubbing. The uniform she wore was damp from dishwater, the colour faded even more than before. Her reflection in the polished copper pots looked exhausted, a little girl who had learned to hide her pain behind a fragile smile. Mrs. Pemberton, the head cook, watched from across the kitchen, her heart breaking. "My lamb," she murmured softly, "if your papa knew, that woman wouldn't last a day in this house." But Olivia only shook her head quickly. "Please don't tell him, Mrs. Pemberton. She'll only get angrier." Mrs. Pemberton sighed deeply, wringing her apron in her weathered hands. "You're too gentle, child. But mark my words, one day God will settle accounts." "Down the hallway," Veronica's voice rose sharply. "Olivia, where is my breakfast?" Olivia flinched and hurried to the morning room with a tray of tea and scones. She placed it carefully on the table, her little hands trembling. Veronica didn't even look up. She was busy reading a letter, smiling to herself. "I'm going to London today," she said breezily. "Make sure the silver is polished before I return tomorrow. And don't touch the piano again. You don't deserve to play anything in this house." "Yes, Your Grace," Olivia whispered. But before Veronica could say more, the sound of hooves and carriage wheels thundered up the long gravel drive. The sharp, commanding sound made Veronica freeze mid-sip. Slowly, her head lifted. "No," she muttered under her breath, her face paling. "He wasn't supposed to be back until next week." Mrs. Pemberton's eyes widened from the doorway. "The Duke's come home," she whispered, her voice trembling with hope. Veronica's teacup clattered against the saucer. "Why didn't anyone send a word?" The heavy oak front doors swung open with a resounding boom. Duke David Ashford stepped into the entrance hall, tall, broad-shouldered, his tailored travelling coat dusted with road grime. His dark hair was windswept, his sharp green eyes scanning the room with the intensity of a man who'd ridden through the night. He dropped his leather satchel by the door and looked around. "Olivia," he called, his deep voice echoing through the marble halls. The little girl froze, where she stood in the doorway of the morning room. She turned slowly, and the moment her eyes met his, her voice broke. "Papa?" She ran. Her tiny feet pattered across the cold marble, her oversized uniform flapping around her as she crashed into his arms with a force that nearly knocked him back a step. He held her tightly, his large hand instinctively running through her loosened braids. "My darling girl," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Why are you shaking? What's wrong?" That was when he noticed the uniform. His expression shifted instantly, from warmth to confusion, then to cold, dawning fury. He held her at arm's length, his eyes sweeping over the faded grey fabric, the torn hem, the redness of her small hands. "Why are you dressed like this?" His voice was low, dangerous. "Who made you wear this?" Veronica stepped forward quickly, forcing a bright smile onto her face. "David, darling, you're home early. What a wonderful surprise." He didn't look at her. His eyes were locked on his daughter. "Olivia," he said gently, kneeling to her level. "Tell me the truth. Who did this to you?" Olivia's lip trembled. She glanced at Veronica, then back at her father. I was just helping, Papa," she whispered. "Her Grace said I should learn to be useful." Duke David's jaw tightened. Slowly he stood and turned to face Veronica. "Useful," he repeated, his voice like steel. Veronica's smile faltered. "It's nothing serious, David. You're misunderstanding. I was simply teaching her discipline and responsibility." "Discipline?" He cut in sharply, his voice rising and echoing through the hall. "You dressed the daughter of a duke like a common servant. You made her scrub floors and serve your guests." Veronica blinked, her facade cracking. "Darling, who told you?" "She didn't need to tell me anything," he said coldly. He stepped past her and pointed upward, to the far corner of the entrance hall ceiling. There, barely visible in the morning light, was a small black camera with a blinking red indicator light. Veronica's eyes followed his finger. Her face was drained of all colors. You had cameras installed," she stammered. "Yes," Duke David said, his tone icy. "For security, to protect my family, to protect her." He pulled a small brass key from his waistcoat pocket and walked toward his study. "Come," he said simply. Veronica's hands trembled. "David, please, let me explain." "Come," he repeated, his voice leaving no room for argument. The study doors closed with a heavy thud that seemed to shake the entire manor. Duke David walked to his desk, his movements slow and deliberate, like a judge preparing to deliver a verdict. The morning light filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the Persian rug. Olivia stood near the door, clutching the fabric of her uniform, her eyes wide and frightened. She'd never seen her father like this, so silent, so controlled, yet radiating a fury that made the very air feel heavy. Veronica smoothed her skirts, forcing her breathing to steady. She attempted another smile. "David, really, you're overreacting. If you'd just let me explain properly." He held up one hand, silencing her. From his desk drawer, he withdrew a small brass device, a recording mechanism connected to the security system. His fingers moved across it with practiced precision, and within moments, the large portrait behind his desk slid aside, revealing a hidden projection screen. Veronica's breath caught. What is that?" "The truth," Duke David said simply. He pressed a button. The screen flickered to life. The footage began with a wide view of the entrance hall 3 days prior. The timestamp in the corner read 6:47 a.m. Olivia appeared on screen, descending the grand staircase in her nightgown, clutching her mother's journal. She looked so small, so fragile. Then Veronica's voice cut through the silence, sharp and cold. "From now on, you'll wear this during the day. The staff is short-handed, and you're old enough to help earn your keep." On screen, the grey uniform fell to Olivia's feet. Duke David's hands clenched into fists on the desk. The footage continued, scene after scene, day after day. Olivia scrubbed floors on her hands and knees. Olivia carrying heavy buckets of water, stumbling under the weight. Olivia standing in the corner during meals, not allowed to sit at her own table. And Veronica's voice, again and again, "You're clumsy, just like your mother. No one likes a weak child. You don't deserve silk, you don't deserve anything." Then came the footage from the dinner party. The screen showed the elegant dining room filled with Veronica's guests. Olivia entered, trembling as she carried the wine tray. The women's whispers were clearly audible. "Is that the Duke's daughter? Why is she dressed like a maid?" Veronica's response echoed through the study. "She needs to learn her place." Duke David's jaw worked, a muscle twitching in his cheek. Then came the moment of the dropped spoon, the torn uniform, and the slap. The sound cracked through the speakers like a gunshot. On screen, Olivia's small body jerked from the impact. Her hand flew to her cheek, tears streaming down her face, but she made no sound. She simply knelt and cleaned the floor, her tiny shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Veronica's recorded voice floated through the study. "No one likes a weak child." Duke David stopped the footage. The silence that followed was deafening. He stood perfectly still, his back to Veronica, his hands flat on the desk, as if he needed it to hold himself upright. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet it was almost a whisper. "How long?" Veronica's mouth opened and closed. "David!" "How long?" he roared, spinning to face her. The sudden explosion of fury made both Veronica and Olivia flinch. "How long has my daughter been living like a servant in her own home while I was away serving the Crown in Parliament?" It wasn't like that," Veronica stammered, backing toward the door. "I was trying to teach her." "Teach her?" He stalked toward her, his voice rising with each word. "You struck her. You humiliated her in front of your friends. You took a grieving child and broke her spirit for your own twisted amusement." "She needed discipline," Veronica shot back, her own temper flaring now that she was cornered. "She was spoiled, coddled by you, and that precious memory of her mother. I was trying to make her strong." "Strong?" Duke David's voice shook the walls. "You made her terrified. You made her believe she was worthless." He pointed at Olivia, who had pressed herself against the bookshelf, tears streaming down her face. "Look at her. Look at what you've done to my child." Veronica's mask finally cracked completely, her beautiful face twisted with something ugly. Jealousy, resentment, rage. "Your child," she spat. "That's all you ever cared about, wasn't it? Your precious Olivia and the ghost of your perfect first wife. What about me, David? What about what I wanted?" "What you wanted?" He stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. "What you wanted was my title, my fortune and my home, but you never wanted my daughter. You never wanted to be a mother to her." "Why should I?" Veronica's voice turned shrill. "She's not mine. She's just a reminder that I'll always be second to a dead woman." The words hung in the air like poison. Olivia let out a small, broken sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Duke David's face went very still. When he spoke again, his voice was cold as winter frost. "Get out of my sight." Veronica's eyes widened. "What?" "Get out of my sight," he repeated slowly, each word precise and final. "Go to your chambers. Pack your belongings. You have until sunset." "You can't throw me out," Veronica said, her voice rising with panic. "I'm your wife, the Duchess of Ashford. You can't just—" "I can and I will," he said. "My solicitors will contact you regarding the annulment proceedings. The marriage contract had a morality clause, Veronica. You violated it the moment you raised your hand to my daughter." "An annulment?" She laughed wildly. "On what grounds? You have no proof of anything that would—" He gestured to the screen behind him, still frozen on the image of her striking Olivia. "I have all the proof I need. Documented abuse of a child, witnessed by a dozen servants and your own guests. Lady Beatrice has already sent word that she'd be willing to testify to what she saw." Veronica's face went white. You You contacted Beatrice? I contacted everyone who was at your little dinner party, Duke David said coldly. They're all quite horrified by what they witnessed. Some have already withdrawn their invitations to you from upcoming social events. By tomorrow, every drawing room in London will know what kind of woman you truly are. Veronica's legs seemed to give out. She sank into a chair, her hands trembling. You're ruining me, she whispered. No, Duke David said. You ruined yourself. I'm simply making sure everyone knows the truth. He walked to the door and opened it. 2 footmen stood waiting outside, clearly summoned before the confrontation began. Escort Her Grace to her chambers, he said formally. She is to pack her personal belongings only, nothing that belonged to the late Duchess. Nothing that belongs to this estate. She leaves at sunset. Yes, Your Grace, the footman said in unison. Veronica stood shakily, her perfect composure completely shattered. Mascara ran down her cheeks in black streaks. Her hands clutched at her emerald gown as if it were armor. She looked at Duke David one last time. I loved you, she said, her voice breaking. He met her gaze without flinching. Love doesn't hurt children, Veronica. Love protects them. What you felt was possession, and I will not allow you to possess one more moment of our lives. As the footman led her from the study, Veronica cast one final glance at Olivia, not with remorse, but with cold resentment, as if the child was somehow to blame for her downfall. Then she was gone. The moment the door closed, Duke David's rigid posture crumbled. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and dropped to his knees in front of his daughter, pulling her into his arms. I'm so sorry, he whispered into her hair, his voice cracking. I'm so sorry, my darling girl. I should have known. I should have seen it. I should have been here. Olivia's small arms wrapped around his neck, and for the first time in weeks, she let herself truly cry. Not silent, fearful tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. I tried to be good, Papa, she gasped between sobs. I tried so hard, but nothing I did was ever enough. She hated me. She hated me so much. No, he murmured, rocking her gently. This wasn't about you, sweetheart. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. Do you hear me? You are perfect exactly as you are. She said Mama would be ashamed of me. Duke David pulled back, cupping her tear-stained face in his large hands. Your Mama, he said firmly, his own eyes bright with tears, would be so incredibly proud of you, proud of your strength, proud of your kindness, proud that even when you were treated cruelly, you remained gentle and good. He kissed her forehead. And so am I. Olivia buried her face in his shoulder, her fingers clutching the fabric of his coat. They stayed like that for a long time, father and daughter, holding each other in the quiet study while the morning sun climbed higher in the sky. Finally, Duke David took a deep breath and stood, lifting Olivia into his arms even though she was almost too big for it. Come, he said softly. Let's get you out of that horrible uniform. He carried her upstairs to her chambers, the beautiful suite that had been her mother's, with its canopy bed and window seat overlooking the rose garden. Mrs. Pemberton was already there, having somehow anticipated the need. She'd laid out one of Olivia's finest dresses, a soft lavender silk with delicate embroidery. There you are, my lamb, the cook said gently, her own eyes red from crying. Let's get you properly dressed, like the young lady you are. Duke David set Olivia down carefully and turned to give her privacy. I'll be just outside, he said. Take your time. As Mrs. Pemberton helped Olivia out of the maid's uniform, the older woman whispered, Your papa's a good man, child. I knew he'd make things right. Olivia nodded, watching as Mrs. Pemberton took the grey uniform and walked straight to the fireplace. Without ceremony, she threw it into the flames. They both watched it burn, the grey fabric blackening and curling, turning to ash. Good riddance, Mrs. Pemberton muttered. 20 minutes later, Olivia emerged in her lavender dress, her hair properly brushed and braided with ribbons. She looked like herself again, Young, yes, and still fragile, but no longer broken. Duke David smiled, though his eyes remained troubled. Beautiful, he said, just like your mother. He offered her his arm formally, as if she were a grown lady. Lady Olivia, would you do me the honour of joining me for luncheon? I believe cook has prepared your favourite, strawberry tarts. For the first time in weeks, Olivia smiled, a real, genuine smile. Yes, Papa, I'd like that very much. As they descended the grand staircase together, the household staff lined the halls, watching, and when they saw Lady Olivia in her proper dress, walking beside her father, with her head held high, they began to applaud. Softly at first, then louder. The sound echoed through Ashford Manor like thunder, not of judgment but of celebration. The rightful lady of the house had returned. But upstairs, in her chambers, Veronica stood at the window, watching the rose garden below. Her trunks were half packed. Her face was streaked with ruined makeup. Her hands trembled with rage and humiliation. In her hand, she clutched a letter, one she'd been saving, one she'd never intended to use. It was addressed to Duke David, and it contained a secret that would change everything, a secret about Olivia's late mother, a secret that, if revealed, could destroy the Duke's perfect memory of his beloved first wife, and shatter Olivia's world all over again. Veronica's lips curved into a bitter, vengeful smile. If I'm to be ruined, she whispered to the empty room, then everyone burns with me. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manor as Duke David and Olivia shared lunch in the conservatory. For the first time in weeks, genuine laughter echoed through the glass-domed room. Olivia's cheeks were flushed with happiness as her father recounted amusing stories from Parliament. But the peace was shattered by urgent footsteps. Mr. Whitmore, the head butler, appeared in the doorway, his usually composed face troubled. Your Grace, he said quietly. Forgive the interruption, but there's a situation. Duke David set down his teacup. What is it? The Duchess, Lady Veronica, she's in the entrance hall. She's demanding to speak with you before she leaves. She says... He hesitated. She says she has information you need to hear, about the late Duchess Catherine. Olivia's smile faded instantly. Duke David's expression hardened. Tell her I have nothing to say to her. She's threatening to send letters to the London papers, Your Grace. She's claiming she has proof of something regarding Lady Catherine's death. The words hung in the air like a blade. Duke David stood slowly, his jaw tight. Olivia, stay here with Mrs. Pemberton. But Papa, please, darling. I'll handle this. He kissed the top of her head, but Olivia could feel the tension radiating from him. In the entrance hall, Veronica stood beside her packed trunks, still wearing her emerald gown, but looking dishevelled and wild. In her hand, she clutched a yellowed envelope. David, she said as he descended the stairs, we need to talk. We have nothing to discuss, he replied coldly. The carriage is waiting. Even if it concerns the truth about Catherine, Veronica's eyes glittered with malice. Even if I told you she didn't die of fever. Duke David froze mid-step. What did you say? Veronica smiled, holding up the letter. I found this in your late wife's private correspondence, hidden in a locked box in the attic. It's from her physician, the one she saw in secret, the one you never knew about. You're lying, he said, but his voice wavered. Am I? She waved the envelope. This letter details her true condition, the real reason she died. And it's not what you told Olivia. It's not what you told anyone. Duke David's face went pale. Where did you get that? Does it matter? What matters is what I do with it. Veronica's smile turned cruel. Let me stay, David. Reinstate me as your wife, and this letter disappears forever. Refuse me, and tomorrow morning, every newspaper in London will print the truth. Poor little Olivia will learn that her beloved mother's death wasn't so innocent after all. The grandfather clock ticked loudly in the silence. Duke David stared at the woman before him, his mind racing. Upstairs, hidden in the doorway of the conservatory, Olivia listened with her heart pounding, tears streaming down her face. What secret had Mama been keeping? And was her father about to sacrifice everything to protect it? The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manor as Duke David and Olivia shared lunch in the conservatory. For the first time in weeks, genuine laughter echoed through the glass-domed room. Olivia's cheeks were flushed with happiness as her father recounted amusing stories from Parliament. But the peace was shattered by urgent footsteps. Mr. Whitmore, the head butler, appeared in the doorway, his usually composed face troubled. "Your Grace," he said quietly. "Forgive the interruption, but there's a situation." Duke David set down his teacup. "What is it?" "The Duchess, Lady Veronica, she's in the entrance hall. She's demanding to speak with you before she leaves. She says—" He hesitated. "She says she has information you need to hear." "About the late Duchess Catherine." Olivia's smile faded instantly. Duke David's expression hardened. "Tell her I have nothing to say to her. She's threatening to send letters to the London papers, Your Grace. She's claiming she has proof of something regarding Lady Catherine's death." The words hung in the air like a blade. Duke David stood slowly, his jaw tight. "Olivia, stay here with Mrs. Pemberton." "But Papa—" "Please, darling, I'll handle this." He kissed the top of her head, but Olivia could feel the tension radiating from him. In the entrance hall, Veronica stood beside her packed trunks, still wearing her emerald gown but looking disheveled and wild. Her hair had come loose from its pins, and her eyes were red-rimmed but blazing with defiance. In her hand, she clutched a yellowed envelope. "David," she said as he descended the stairs, "we need to talk." "We have nothing to discuss," he replied coldly. "The carriage is waiting." "Even if it concerns the truth about Catherine?" Veronica's eyes glittered with malice. "Even if I told you she didn't die of fever?" Duke David froze mid-step. "What did you say?" Veronica smiled, a cruel twist of her lips. She held up the letter, waving it slightly. "I found this in your late wife's private correspondence, hidden in a locked box in the attic, one the servants missed when they were cleaning out her things. It's from her physician, the one she saw in secret, the one you never knew about." "You're lying," he said, but his voice wavered. "Am I?" She waved the envelope. "This letter details her true condition, the real reason she died. And it's not what you told Olivia. It's not what you told anyone. Not even yourself, I suspect." Duke David's face went pale. His hand gripped the banister. "Where did you get that?" "Does it matter?" Veronica's smile turned vicious. "What matters is what I do with it. Let me stay, David. Reinstate me as your wife. Forget this annulment nonsense. And this letter disappears forever. Refuse me, and tomorrow morning, every newspaper in London will print the truth. Poor little Olivia will learn that her beloved mother's death wasn't so innocent after all." The grandfather clock ticked loudly in the silence. Duke David stared at the woman before him, his mind racing. His heart pounded in his chest. Upstairs, hidden in the shadowed doorway of the conservatory, Olivia listened with her heart breaking, tears streaming down her face. What secret had Mama been keeping? And was Papa about to sacrifice everything to protect it? Duke David descended the final steps slowly, his eyes never leaving Veronica's face. "Give me the letter," he said quietly, "not until you agree to my terms. Give me the letter." Veronica clutched it tighter to her chest. "Do you agree?" For a long moment, Duke David said nothing. The servants had gathered in the corridors, watching in silent horror. Mrs. Pemberton's hand was pressed to her mouth. Mr. Whitmore stood rigid, his face carved from stone. Then Duke David did something unexpected. He laughed. It was a short, bitter sound, but genuine. "You really don't know, do you?" he said. Veronica's confidence flickered. "Know what?" "What's actually in that letter?" He took another step toward her. "You found it. You read it. But you didn't understand it." "I understood perfectly," Veronica snapped. Catherine was ill long before the fever. She was hiding something from you, something shameful that she was dying anyway, Duke David finished, his voice breaking slightly. Yes, Veronica, I know. The words fell like stones. Veronica's mouth opened, then closed. You knew? Catherine told me herself, 3 months before she died. Duke David's eyes were bright with tears, but his voice remained steady. She had a weak heart. I have had it since birth. The doctor said it was a miracle she'd lived as long as she did. A miracle she'd been able to bear Olivia at all. He took the final steps toward Veronica, standing directly before her. She made me promise not to tell anyone, not the staff, not her family, and especially not Olivia. She didn't want our daughter growing up thinking she was somehow responsible, or that her mother was fragile. Catherine wanted to be remembered as strong, as vibrant, as full of life. Tears slipped down his cheeks. So when the fever came, when it was too much for her already weakened heart, yes, I told everyone it was the fever that took her, because that's what Catherine wanted. That's what she made me swear to protect. Veronica's hand, still clutching the letter, began to tremble. But this could still destroy you, she said desperately. If people knew you lied. I didn't lie, Duke David said firmly. I honored my wife's dying wish, and I would do it again. He reached out and plucked the envelope from Veronica's shaking fingers. She didn't resist. You thought this was leverage, he said quietly, looking at the yellowed paper. You thought this was a scandal, but all it is proof of how much I loved her, and how much she loved our daughter. He turned to the fireplace, where a low fire still burned. Without hesitation, he threw the letter into the flames. They both watched as it caught, blackened, and curled into ash. No! Veronica lunged forward, but it was too late. The letter was gone, and with it, her final weapon. Veronica sank to her knees on the marble floor, her face in her hands. For a moment, she looked almost pitiable, a woman who'd gambled everything and lost. But Duke David felt nothing but cold resolve. Mr. Whitmore, he said, please ensure Lady Veronica's belongings are loaded into the carriage. She leaves within the hour. Yes, Your Grace. Veronica looked up at him, mascara streaming down her face. I have nowhere to go, she whispered. You should have thought of that before you struck my daughter, Duke David said without sympathy. Your family estate in Cornwall still stands, I believe, or you may petition your brother for assistance. But you will not remain here. David, please. Goodbye, Veronica. He turned his back on her and walked toward the stairs, where Olivia stood trembling, having heard everything. Their eyes met. Papa, she said in a small voice, is it true, about Mama's heart? He climbed the stairs and knelt before her, taking her small hands in his. Yes, my darling, it's true. Why didn't you tell me? Because your mother wanted you to remember her as she was, full of joy and laughter, not as someone fragile or ill. She didn't want you to spend your life sad. Olivia's lip trembled. But I'm sad anyway, because she's gone. I know, he said gently. I know, sweetheart, but that sadness will ease in time. And one day, when you think of her, you'll smile before you cry. That's what she wanted for you. Olivia threw her arms around his neck. I love you, Papa. I love you too, my darling girl, more than anything in this world. Below, Veronica was escorted to the waiting carriage, her trunks loaded behind. The servant stood in silent witness as she climbed inside, her beautiful gown crumpled, her face ruined by tears and rage. As the carriage pulled away, Mrs. Pemberton muttered, "Good riddance to bad rubbish." Several others murmured in agreement. Inside the house, Duke David carried Olivia to the drawing room and settled her on the sofa, wrapping a soft blanket around her shoulders. Rest now, he said. I'm not going anywhere, I promise. You won't leave for Parliament again? She asked anxiously. He smiled. Not for a long while. I've sent word that I'm taking a leave of absence. Family matters require my attention. Me? She asked with a small smile. You, he confirmed, tapping her nose gently. the most important matter in my life. For the first time since her mother's death, Olivia felt truly safe. The nightmare was over. Or so they thought. 3 days had passed since Veronica's departure. Ashford Manor felt different now. Lighter, as if a dark cloud had lifted. The servants moved with renewed energy, their whispered conversations no longer tinged with fear. Laughter had returned to the hallways. Olivia spent her mornings in the library with her father, reading together by the fire. Her afternoons were filled with piano lessons and walks through the rose garden. The bruise on her cheek had faded and colour had returned to her face. But Duke David noticed she still flinched at sudden noises, still apologised unnecessarily, still sometimes stood when she should sit, as if waiting for permission to be comfortable in her own home. The wounds Veronica had inflicted ran deeper than bruises. That morning, as they sat at breakfast together, Duke David made a decision. "Olivia," he said, setting down his newspaper, "how would you feel about a journey?" She looked up from her porridge, curious. "A journey where, Papa?" "To the sea," he said with a smile. "I've arranged for us to stay at the family cottage in Brighton for a fortnight, just the two of us. Well, Mrs. Pemberton to cook, and Mr. Whitmore to manage things. But a small party, quiet, peaceful." Olivia's eyes widened. "The cottage where you and Mamma used to go?" "The very same." His smile softened. "I think it's time we made new memories there. Happy ones. What do you say?" For the first time in months, Olivia's smile reached her eyes. "Yes, Papa, I'd like that very much." The cottage in Brighton was everything Olivia remembered from early childhood. A charming stone house, perched on a cliff overlooking the sea, with wild roses climbing the walls and the constant sound of waves crashing below. The salty air filled her lungs as she stepped out of the carriage, and for a moment she could almost hear her mother's laughter in the wind. "Welcome home, my lamb," Mrs. Pemberton said warmly, emerging from the cottage where she'd arrived ahead to prepare everything. "Your room is ready, and I've made your favourite biscuits." That evening, Duke David and Olivia walked along the beach as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "Papa," Olivia said, her small hand in his, "may I ask you something?" "Anything, darling." Do you think Mama would be disappointed in me? For not being stronger with Veronica? For not telling you sooner?" Duke David stopped walking. He knelt in the sand, heedless of his expensive trousers, and looked directly into his daughter's eyes. "Listen to me carefully, Olivia. Your mother would be so incredibly proud of you, not despite what happened, but because of how you handled it." "But I didn't handle it," Olivia whispered. "I just endured it." "Exactly," he said firmly. "You endured. You survived. Do you know how much strength that takes? You were frightened and alone, but you never became cruel yourself. You remained kind to the servants. You kept your mother's memory alive in your heart. That, my darling, is true courage." Tears slipped down Olivia's cheeks, but they were different now, cleansing rather than painful. "I miss her so much," she said. "I know." "So do I." He pulled her into his arms. "But she's still with us, Olivia. In your smile, in your kindness, in every good choice you make. That's how love works. It doesn't die, it transforms." They sat together on the sand, watching the waves roll in and out, constant and eternal. "Papa," Olivia said after a long silence. "Yes?" "I think I'm going to be all right." He kissed the top of her head. "I know you will, and I'll be right here beside you, every step of the way." Over the next week, something remarkable happened. Olivia began to heal. Not all at once. Healing never works that way. But in small moments, her laughter as she chased seagulls on the beach, her excitement when she found a perfect shell, her peaceful sleep, no longer interrupted by nightmares. One afternoon, Duke David found her in the cottage garden, kneeling beside the rose bushes with a small pair of shears. "What are you doing, sweetheart?" "Cutting roses," she said simply. Mama used to do this. She said roses are stronger when you prune them. They grow back more beautiful. He watched as she carefully cut a stem, her movements gentle but confident. I think, she continued thoughtfully, that people are like roses too. Sometimes bad things cut us. But if we have good soil and sunshine, she looked up at him with a smile, we can grow back even more beautiful. Duke David's throat tightened with emotion. His daughter, his brave, wise, remarkable daughter, was teaching him about resilience. You're absolutely right, he managed to say. She handed him a perfect pink rose. This one is for you, Papa, for being my sunshine. On their final evening in Brighton, as they sat by the cottage fire, Duke David pulled out a leather-bound journal. I have something for you, he said. Olivia looked at it curiously. The leather was worn but well cared for, and her mother's initials were embossed on the cover. Is that your mother's journal? He confirmed. I've been keeping it safe for you. I think you're ready for it now. With trembling fingers, Olivia opened the first page. In her mother's elegant handwriting, it read, To my dearest Olivia, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you in body, but know that I am forever with you in spirit. These pages contain my thoughts, my hopes, my dreams for you, but most of all they contain my love. You are and always will be the greatest joy of my life. Be brave, my darling. Be kind. And know that you are loved beyond measure. Your devoted Mama. Olivia's tears fell onto the page, but she was smiling. Thank you, Papa, she whispered. That night, she read every word her mother had written, learning about the woman Catherine had been before illness claimed her. Funny, strong, full of dreams. And in those pages, Olivia found not just her mother's memory, but a roadmap for her own future. When they returned to Ashford Manor 2 weeks later, Olivia walked through the doors with her head held high. The staff gathered to welcome them home, and Mrs. Pemberton embraced Olivia tightly. Look at you, she said, beaming. You've got your spark back, my lamb. Olivia smiled. I feel different, stronger. That's because you are, Duke David said, his hand on her shoulder. And you always were. You just needed to remember. As Olivia climbed the stairs to her room, she paused at her mother's portrait. I'm going to be all right, Mama, she whispered, just like you wanted. And for the first time, she could have sworn the painted eyes smiled back. But downstairs, Mr. Whitmore approached Duke David with a letter. This arrived while you were away, Your Grace, from Lady Beatrice. Duke David opened it, scanning the contents. His expression grew serious. It seems, he said slowly, that Veronica has been spreading rumors in London, claiming she was the victim, that we mistreated her. Mr. Whitmore's face darkened. Surely no one believes such lies. Some might, Duke David said. Society loves scandal. And Veronica can be very convincing when she wants to be. He folded the letter carefully. It appears our troubles aren't quite over yet, but this time... He looked up the stairs where Olivia had disappeared, her laughter echoing from above. This time, we face them together, as a family should. Mr. Whitmore nodded. What are your orders, Your Grace? Duke David's eyes hardened with determination. We tell the truth, all of it, and we let society judge for themselves who the real villain is. The battle for their reputation, and for justice, was just beginning. But Duke David and Olivia were ready. Together, they could face anything. The afternoon sun was setting when Veronica descended the grand staircase one final time, her trunks being loaded into the waiting carriage by the footmen. She wore a travelling cloak of deep burgundy, her face pale but composed, her eyes cold and calculating. Duke David stood in the entrance hall, his arms crossed, watching her departure with the stillness of a judge who'd delivered his sentence. Olivia clung to Mrs. Pemberton in the doorway of the drawing-room, half hidden behind the older woman's skirts. The carriage is ready, Your Grace, Mr. Whitmore, the head butler, announced quietly. Veronica paused at the bottom of the stairs, her gloved hand resting on the banister. She turned slowly to face Duke David. "Before I leave," she said, her voice eerily calm, "there's something you should know." "I have no interest in anything you have to say," he replied coldly. "Not even about Catherine." Veronica's lips curved into a cruel smile. "Not even about the secret your precious late wife kept from you? The secret that concerns your daughter?" Duke David's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Veronica reached into her cloak and withdrew a yellowed envelope, sealed with faded wax. "I found this hidden in Catherine's private writing desk, the one you kept locked in the attic as a shrine to her memory." "How touching." Her voice dripped with venom. "It's from her physician, the one she saw in London during the last year of her life. The one she never told you about." The colour drained from Duke David's face. "What are you talking about?" "Your beloved Catherine was dying, David," Veronica said, her eyes glittering with malicious satisfaction. "She had a weak heart, a congenital condition. The doctors told her that bearing a child would likely kill her, but she did it anyway. She chose to have Olivia, knowing full well it would be her death sentence." Olivia gasped softly from the doorway, her small hand flying to her mouth. Duke David took a step forward, his voice dangerous. "You're lying." "Am I?" Veronica waved the letter. "It's all here. Medical records, warnings from her physician, her own written acknowledgement of the risks. Your saint of a wife lied to you for over a year. She gambled with her life and lost. And that child," she pointed at Olivia, "is the reason your wife is dead." The words hung in the air like poison. Olivia's legs buckled. Mrs. Pemberton caught her, wrapping protective arms around the trembling girl. "No," Olivia whispered, tears streaming down her face. "No, that's not true. Mama died of fever. Papa said so. Everyone said so." Duke David's face had gone ashen. His hands trembled at his sides. Veronica smiled triumphantly. The fever merely finished what the pregnancy started. Her heart was too weak to fight it. The death certificate lists cardiac failure as the primary cause, not fever. You just told everyone it was a fever because you couldn't bear the truth. She tucked the letter back into her cloak. "I'm leaving now, as you commanded, but I'm taking this letter with me. And tomorrow morning, every newspaper in London will print the real story. How the beloved Duchess Catherine of Ashford selfishly chose to have a child despite medical warnings, and how that choice orphaned her daughter and widowed her husband." Duke David found his voice. "If you publish that letter—" "You'll what?" Veronica interrupted sharply. "Ruin me? You've already done that. I have nothing left to lose, David." "But you do. You have your perfect memory of Catherine, your daughter's innocence, your family's reputation." She walked toward the door, pausing at the threshold. "Unless, of course, you'd like to reconsider the annulment, reinstate me as Duchess, issue a public apology, and this letter disappears forever. You have until midnight to decide." The door closed behind her with a soft click. In the terrible silence that followed, Olivia's broken voice echoed through the hall. "Papa, is it true? Did Mama die because of me?" Duke David turned to see his daughter's devastated face, and his heart shattered all over again. Duke David crossed the entrance hall in 3 strides and knelt before his daughter, taking her trembling hands in his. "Listen to me, Olivia," he said firmly, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "Listen very carefully." Her tear-filled eyes met his. "Your mother made a choice," he continued, "a brave, selfless choice. She knew the risks, yes, but she also knew that bringing you into this world was worth any price. That doesn't make her death your fault. It makes her sacrifice an act of pure love." "But I killed her," Olivia sobbed. "If I'd never been born, then she would have died anyway," he interrupted gently but firmly. "A few months later, perhaps. A year at most. The doctors told her she wouldn't live past 30, even without bearing a child. But those final months of carrying you, of knowing you were coming, those were the happiest months of her life. I watched her glow with joy, Olivia. She wasn't afraid. She was at peace." He wiped her tears with his thumb. And when you were born, when she held you for the first time, do you know what she said to me? Olivia shook her head, unable to speak. She said, I've lived more in this moment than in all my years before it. Our daughter is perfect, David. Protect her, love her, and tell her every day that she was wanted, that she was worth everything. Fresh tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks. But something in her expression shifted, from devastation to a fragile, dawning understanding. She wanted me, she whispered. More than anything in this world, Duke David said. You weren't the cause of her death, my darling. You were the reason she lived as fully as she did. Mrs. Pemberton spoke up quietly from behind them, her weathered voice thick with emotion. I was there when you were born, Lady Olivia. I saw your mother's face. She wasn't in pain, she was radiant, and she held you and kissed your forehead and told you she loved you. Those were her last words. I love you. No regret, not fear, just love. Olivia turned to look at the kind cook who'd been like a grandmother to her all these years. Truly? In my life, child, your mother died happy because she'd given life to you. Duke David stood, pulling Olivia into his arms. She buried her face in his chest, her small body shaking with sobs. But this time they were different. Not sobs of guilt, but of grief mixed with relief. After a long moment, she pulled back and looked up at her father with red-rimmed but determined eyes. What are we going to do about Veronica's letter, Papa? Will everyone think Mama was selfish? Duke David's expression hardened with resolve. No, he said quietly, because we're not going to let Veronica control the truth anymore. He turned to Mr. Whitmore, who'd been standing silently nearby. Summon my solicitors immediately, and send word to Lady Beatrice. Ask if she'd be willing to come to the manor tonight. I have a plan, but I'll need witnesses. Mr. Whitmore bowed. At once, Your Grace. Duke David looked down at his daughter. Veronica thinks she holds all the power because she has that letter, but she's forgotten something very important. What, Papa? His eyes glinted with cold determination. The truth isn't just facts on paper, it's the story behind them. And we're going to tell your mother's story the way it deserves to be told, not as a scandal, but as the greatest love story I've ever known. For the first time since Veronica's revelation, hope flickered in Olivia's eyes. What do you need me to do? Duke David smiled, a real smile, proud and fierce. I need you to be brave, just like your mother was. Can you do that? Olivia straightened her shoulders, wiping the last of her tears away. Yes, Papa, for Mama. That's my girl. Outside, the sun had fully set, and the manor was bathed in twilight, but inside, a new determination burned bright. Veronica had made one critical mistake. She'd threatened the people Duke David loved most in the world, and now she was about to discover exactly what happened when you backed a lion into a corner. Within the hour, Ashford Manor's study had transformed into a war room. Lady Beatrice arrived first, sweeping through the entrance with the commanding presence of a woman who'd navigated London society for 40 years. She embraced Olivia warmly before taking her seat. I came as quickly as I could, she said, her sharp eyes fixing on Duke David. What's happened? Duke David handed her the letter Veronica had mentioned, or rather a copy he'd sent a footman to intercept from Veronica's chambers before she'd finished packing. Lady Beatrice read it carefully, her expression growing more thoughtful with each line. So it's true, she murmured. Catherine knew she was dying. Yes, Duke David confirmed, but Veronica intends to twist it into a scandal, to make my late wife appear selfish and reckless, and to make Olivia believe she's responsible for her mother's death. Lady Beatrice set down the letter and looked at Olivia with infinite gentleness. My dear child, your mother was one of the bravest women I ever knew. This letter doesn't diminish her, it proves her courage. That's exactly what I intend to show all of London, Duke David said, but I need your help. Before Lady Beatrice could respond, the door opened and two more figures entered. Lord Ashton, Duke David's closest friend from Parliament, and Dr. Morris, the family physician who had attended Catherine during her final days. "You summoned us urgently," Lord Ashton said, removing his hat. "What's this about Veronica threatening to publish something damaging?" Duke David quickly explained the situation. As he spoke, he watched the reactions around the room: shock, anger, and finally, determination. Dr. Morris spoke first, his elderly voice steady. "I attended the Duchess Catherine during her pregnancy and in her final hours. I can testify to the medical facts, but more importantly, I can testify to her state of mind. She was not reckless, Your Grace. She was fully informed and at peace with her choice. And I," Lady Beatrice added firmly, "can testify to what I witnessed at Veronica's dinner party, the abuse, the humiliation of a child. If she attempts to publish lies about Catherine, I'll ensure every drawing room in London knows the truth about her character." Lord Ashton leaned forward. "What's your plan, David?" Duke David's expression hardened with resolve. "Veronica thinks she can control the narrative by threatening to publish first. But what if we beat her to it? What if we publish the full truth ourselves, not as a scandal, but as a tribute to Catherine's courage? We'll include the medical records, yes, but also Dr. Morris's testimony about her clarity of mind and peace with her decision. We'll include statements from those who knew her, who saw her joy during her pregnancy." He stood pacing to the window. "We'll show London that my wife didn't selfishly abandon her child. She gave her life to bring her into the world. There's a difference between recklessness and sacrifice, and I won't let Veronica erase that distinction." "It's risky," Lord Ashton said carefully. "Society can be cruel, even when presented with facts." "Then let them be cruel," Duke David said sharply. "I'd rather face their judgment honestly than live under Veronica's blackmail. My daughter deserves to know her mother was a hero, not a cautionary tale." Olivia, who'd been sitting quietly, spoke up in a small but steady voice. "I want to help, Papa." Everyone turned to look at her. "How, my darling?" Duke David asked gently. "Let me write something," she said, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "About Mama, about what she means to me. If people are going to read about her, they should hear from her daughter. They should know I don't blame her. I love her." Lady Beatrice's eyes glistened with tears. "That, my dear child, would be the most powerful testimony of all." Duke David crossed to Olivia and knelt beside her chair. "Are you certain?" "It will be published in newspapers. Everyone will read it." Olivia nodded, her chin lifting with determination that reminded everyone in the room achingly of Catherine. "Mama was brave enough to choose me. I can be brave enough to defend her." Duke David pulled her into his arms, his voice thick with emotion. "Your mother would be so proud of you." Mr. Whitmore cleared his throat from the doorway. "Your Grace, the solicitors have arrived. And there's something else. A messenger came from Lady Veronica. She's demanding your answer by midnight, as she stated. That gives us less than 5 hours." Duke David stood, his jaw set with determination. "Then we work fast. Dr. Morris, I need your written testimony. Lady Beatrice, your statement about the dinner party. Lord Ashton, I'll need your connections at the Times and the Morning Post. We'll need to publish simultaneously in every major paper before dawn." "Consider it done," Lord Ashton said. "And Olivia," Duke David turned to his daughter, "you'll write your letter. Mrs. Pemberton will help you. Take your time, write from your heart." Olivia nodded, standing with a new purpose. As the room erupted into organized chaos, papers being drafted, messengers being dispatched, strategies being debated, Duke David felt something he hadn't felt since Catherine's death. Control, not over death or illness or grief. Those were beyond anyone's control. But control over how the story would be told, control over his family's dignity, and control over ensuring that Veronica's cruelty would never hurt his daughter again. At 11:30 that night, a sealed envelope was delivered to the offices of every major London newspaper. Inside was the full truth about Duchess Catherine's death, but told with love, medical accuracy, and the heartbreaking words of a 12-year-old girl who wanted the world to know her mother was a hero. And at 11:45, a different messenger arrived at the inn where Veronica was staying. The message was brief. "Your midnight deadline has passed. Check tomorrow's papers. You've already lost. D.A." Veronica tore open the note, her hands shaking with rage and dawning horror. She'd been outmaneuvered, and by dawn, all of London would know exactly who she really was. Dawn broke over London like a revelation. By 6 o'clock in the morning, every major newspaper in the city had published the same front-page story. The courage of Duchess Catherine, a mother's ultimate sacrifice. The article was unlike anything London society had seen before, not a scandal piece, but a carefully documented tribute combining medical records, physician testimony, and the heartbreaking words of a young daughter. Dr. Morris's statement was clinical but moving. Duchess Catherine was fully informed of the risks to her health. She consulted with 3 separate physicians, all of whom advised against pregnancy. Her decision to proceed was not made in ignorance or recklessness, but with complete clarity of mind and profound courage. In my 40 years of medical practice, I have never witnessed such selfless maternal love. Lady Beatrice's testimony followed, describing not only Catherine's character, but also contrasting it sharply with recent events. While Catherine gave her life to bring her daughter into the world, there are those who would seek to profit from that sacrifice by distorting it into scandal. I witnessed firsthand how one such person treated young Lady Olivia, with cruelty, abuse, and calculated malice. Let history judge who truly honoured the Ashford family, and who sought only to destroy it. But it was Olivia's letter that stopped all of London in its tracks. "My name is Lady Olivia Ashford, and I am 12 years old. I never knew my mother except through stories, portraits, and the love everyone speaks of when they remember her. For a long time, I wondered if she regretted her choice, if she looked at me and wished she had chosen differently. Recently, someone told me that my mother's death was my fault, that she was selfish for choosing to have me, that I killed her, but my papa showed me my mother's journals. In them she wrote, 'Every kick, every flutter, every moment of feeling this child grows inside me is a gift. If I have only months left, I choose to spend them creating life rather than fearing death. My mother didn't die because of me. She lived for me. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she did it with joy. That's not selfishness. That's the greatest love I can imagine.' To anyone who would try to turn my mother's sacrifice into something shameful, you cannot. Her love is stronger than your lies. Her courage is greater than your cruelty. And I will spend every day of my life trying to be worthy of what she gave me. I am my mother's daughter, and I am not afraid anymore." The final paragraph was signed in Olivia's own careful handwriting, reproduced in the papers. By mid-morning, all of London was talking. In drawing rooms across Mayfair, ladies gathered over tea, newspapers spread before them. "Extraordinary," the Duchess of Wellington murmured. "I knew Catherine, you know. This is exactly the sort of thing she would do, brave to the very end. And that monster Veronica tried to twist it into a scandal," another woman said, her voice sharp with indignation. "Thank God the Duke exposed her first. Did you read the part about the dinner party? She struck the child, in front of guests. Unconscionable. She should be driven from society entirely." The conversation was repeated in club rooms, Parliament corridors, and society gatherings throughout the city. Public opinion turned decisively and brutally against Veronica. At the inn where Veronica was staying, she sat frozen in her room, surrounded by copies of every newspaper. Her hands trembled as she read Olivia's letter for the 3rd time. She'd been so certain the medical records would create scandal, so confident that society would judge Catherine harshly for choosing motherhood over survival. But she'd miscalculated catastrophically. Society hadn't seen recklessness, they'd seen heroism. They hadn't blamed Catherine, they'd celebrated her. And worst of all, they'd turned their judgment entirely on Veronica herself. A knock at her door made her jump. "What?" she called out sharply. The innkeeper's apologetic voice filtered through. "Begging your pardon, ma'am, but there are reporters outside. Quite a lot of them. They're asking for a statement about the Ashford situation." Veronica's face went pale. "Tell them I have no comment. I tried, ma'am, but they're not leaving, and—" He hesitated. "I've received word from the owner. He's requesting you find alternative accommodation. By tomorrow." Her mouth fell open. "You're throwing me out." "The owner doesn't want the establishment associated with, well, with the situation, ma'am. I'm very sorry." The door clicked as he retreated. Veronica stood on shaking legs and moved to the window, carefully pulling back the curtain. Below, at least 20 journalists crowded the street, notebooks in hand, shouting questions up at her window. "Lady Veronica, is it true you abused the Duke's daughter? Did you attempt to blackmail Duke David? What do you say to Lady Olivia's letter?" She let the curtain fall, her breath coming in short gasps. She was ruined. Completely, utterly ruined. Every door in London society would be closed to her. Her family would disown her to protect their own reputation. She had no money of her own. Everything had depended on the remaining Duchess of Ashford. And now that is gone too. Meanwhile, at Ashford Manor, a very different scene was unfolding. Letters of support had been pouring in all morning, from duchesses, countesses, even from the Queen's own lady-in-waiting, expressing admiration for Olivia's courage and sympathy for what she'd endured. Duke David read each one aloud to Olivia over breakfast, watching her eyes grow wider with each expression of support. "Listen to this one," he said, smiling. "Dear Lady Olivia, your mother and I were friends at school. She was the bravest person I knew then, and your letter proves that courage runs in your blood. You honour her memory beautifully. With deepest admiration, Lady Margaret Pemberton." Olivia's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "They don't think Mamma was wrong. They think she was magnificent," Duke David said firmly. "Just as I always have, just as you always should." Mr. Whitmore entered with another silver tray of letters. "Your Grace, these just arrived, and there's a gentleman here to see you, Lord Chancellor Harrison from the High Court." Duke David's eyebrows rose. "Show him in." Lord Chancellor Harrison was a stern-faced man in his 60s, carrying an official-looking document case. "Your Grace," he said with a formal bow, "I've come on behalf of the court. We've reviewed the evidence you submitted regarding your marriage to Lady Veronica, including the security footage of child abuse." Duke David stood. "And?" "The annulment has been granted, effective immediately," Harrison said. "Furthermore, given the severity of the abuse documented, Lady Veronica is barred from any legal claim to your estate, title, or finances. The marriage is voided as if it never occurred." Relief flooded through Duke David. "Thank you, Lord Chancellor." "There's more," Harrison continued, his stern face softening slightly as he glanced at Olivia. "The court wishes to commend Lady Olivia for her bravery in speaking publicly about her mother. Her testimony has sparked discussions about protecting children in aristocratic households. She may have helped more children than she knows." Olivia looked up, startled. "Really?" "Really," Harrison confirmed. "You're a very brave young lady. Your mother would be proud." After he left, Duke David pulled Olivia into his arms. "You did it, my darling. You stood up for your mother, for yourself, and you won." Olivia hugged him tightly. "We won, Papa. Together." That afternoon, one final visitor arrived at Ashford Manor. Lady Beatrice swept in, her face alight with fierce satisfaction. "I come bearing news," she announced. "Veronica has been expelled from 3 hotels, 2 clubs, and every notable social circle in London. Her brother has publicly disowned her, and I have it on good authority that she's boarding a ship to America tomorrow morning. Apparently the only place she might escape the scandal." Duke David nodded slowly. "Then it's truly over." "Not quite," Lady Beatrice said with a slight smile. She handed him a small card. The Queen's secretary contacted me. Her Majesty wishes to receive you and Lady Olivia at court next month. She was deeply moved by Olivia's letter and wishes to personally commend her courage. Olivia gasped. The Queen wants to meet me? Indeed, Lady Beatrice said warmly. You've become quite the celebrated young lady, my dear. The girl who honoured her mother is what they're calling you in the society columns. Duke David looked down at his daughter, his eyes bright with pride and love. What do you say, my darling? Shall we accept? Olivia's smile was radiant, the first truly carefree smile she'd worn in months. Yes, Papa, I think Mamma would like that. As the sun set that evening, Duke David stood in the rose garden, Catherine's favourite place, with Olivia beside him. Thank you, he whispered to the sky, to the memory of his beloved first wife. Thank you for giving her to me. Thank you for your courage. And I promise, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure she knows how loved she was, how loved she is. Olivia slipped her small hand into his. I can feel her here sometimes, she said softly. In the garden. Do you think that's silly? Not at all, Duke David said, squeezing her hand. I feel her too, and I think she's smiling right now. Above them, the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, and in that moment, surrounded by roses and starlight, the Duke and his daughter finally found peace. 6 months later. The rose garden at Ashford Manor was in full bloom, the air sweet with the scent of early summer. Sunlight dappled through the leaves of the old oak tree, where a white marble bench sat, Catherine's favourite spot. Olivia sat there now, no longer in a maid's uniform or even her finest silks, but in a simple summer dress of pale yellow, her golden hair loose around her shoulders. In her lap lay her mother's journal, but she wasn't reading it anymore. She was writing on her own. Dear Diary, she wrote in careful script. Papa says Mama would be proud of how much I've grown. I think he's right. I'm not afraid anymore. Not of Veronica, not of the truth, and not of my own story. There you are. She looked up to see Duke David approaching, carrying a small wooden box. He'd changed too in these past months. The lines of grief around his eyes had softened into something gentler, not the absence of sorrow, but the presence of peace. He'd resigned from Parliament to spend more time at home, and the manor had come alive again with music, laughter, and the sound of a father and daughter simply being together. I have something for you, he said, sitting beside her. Olivia closed her journal as he opened the box. Inside was a locket, golden and delicate, with an intricate rose engraved on its surface. This was your mother's, he said quietly. She wore it every day. Inside is a portrait of her as a young woman, and I've added one of you as well, so you can carry her with you, and she can carry you with her. Olivia's eyes filled with tears as he fastened it around her neck. Thank you, Papa, she whispered. He smiled. You've become quite the celebrated young lady, you know. The Times is still receiving letters about your tribute to your mother. They're calling you the girl who honoured her mother with truth. Olivia blushed. I only wrote what I felt, and that's why it moved so many hearts. After Veronica's scheme had crumbled, the public response had been overwhelming, but not in the way Veronica had intended. Instead of scandal and shame, London society had rallied around the story of Catherine's courage and Olivia's love. Donations had poured in for a charitable foundation established in Catherine's name to support orphaned children. Invitations arrived daily for Olivia to speak at events about grief, healing, and the power of truth. And Veronica, she'd fled to the continent in disgrace, her name struck from every guest list, her reputation in ruins. The annulment had been finalized within weeks. She'd tried once to publish her own version of events, but no newspaper would print it, not after Olivia's heartfelt tribute had captured the nation's sympathy. Papa, Olivia said, looking up at the cloudless sky, do you think Mamma knows that we defended her, that we told her story the right way? Duke David followed her gaze upward, his hand finding hers. I know she does, my darling, and I know she's smiling. A soft breeze rustled through the rose bushes, carrying petals that danced in the sunlight like tiny butterflies. Olivia leaned against her father's shoulder, the locket warm against her heart. "I'm glad you came home early that day," she whispered. "I'm glad you saw the truth." "So am I," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I made a promise to your mother the day you were born, that I would protect you, cherish you, and make sure you knew how deeply you were loved. I failed that promise for a while, but I intend to keep it for the rest of my life." "You're keeping it now," Olivia said simply. "That's what matters." From the manor, Mrs. Pemberton's voice called out cheerfully, "Lady Olivia, Your Grace, luncheon is ready. Strawberry tarts fresh from the oven." Olivia laughed, a bright, clear sound that seemed to chase away the last shadows of the past. "Come on, Papa. We mustn't keep Mrs. Pemberton waiting." Duke David stood and offered his arm with exaggerated formality. "My lady." She took it with a curtsy and a giggle. As they walked back toward the manor together, father and daughter, the roses swayed gently in the breeze behind them. And if you looked very closely at the portrait in the entrance hall, the one of Catherine with her warm smile and gentle eyes, you might have sworn she was watching them with infinite love and pride. Inside the manor, the table was set with fine china, fresh flowers, and strawberry tarts piled high with cream. Mr. Whitmore stood by with the faintest smile, and the household staff went about their duties with the contentment that comes from serving a home filled with love rather than fear. That evening, as the sun set over Ashford Manor, Olivia stood at her bedroom window and opened the locket around her neck. On one side was her mother's young face, beautiful and full of hope. On the other, a miniature portrait of Olivia herself, painted just last month. "Thank you, Mama," she whispered, "for choosing me, for loving me, for being brave." The locket clicked closed, resting over her heart, and somewhere, in the space between memory and eternity, perhaps Catherine heard her daughter's words and smiled. Because love, true love, sacrificial love, the kind that gives everything and asks nothing in return, never truly dies. It lives on in the hearts of those who were loved. And in a rose garden in the English countryside, it bloomed forever. The end. This story reminds us that the truth, told with love, is more powerful than any lie. Have you ever had to stand up for someone's memory or defend the truth against those who tried to twist it? Share your story in the comments. Your words might inspire someone else who needs to hear them. And if this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Our next story is about a widow who discovered her late husband had a secret that changed everything. You won't want to miss it.